Welcome to the Document3D tutorials. In these tutorials, you will learn how to access your 3D CAD data, work with the software, and then publish to a variety of formats. There are two methods for accessing your CAD data, depending on the source. The easiest approach is to import the 3D CAD file directly. Alternatively, you may use one of our CAD exporter add-ins. That's what we're demonstrating in this part. In this example, we're using Solid Edge to export. Once we have our subassembly active in Solid Edge, we can go to our add-ins ribbon, and from there we can simply click on Save QSM to pick a file name to export the data to. Different exporters will behave a little differently. For example, if you have the SolidWorks one or the Inventor one, they might have a slightly different user interface. Okay, now that we've exported that QSM file from our CAD software, we can go and open that up or import that into Document3D. So we can import the model. Here's the file that we saved off right here. We'll open that up. And once we open that, you'll see that we have, the geometry, obviously, the 3D model. We have the materials that came in from Solid Edge as well. If I go over to the model ribbon and bring up the model panel, you'll see that we have the hierarchy of the CAD file. This should match the model tree that you would see in Solid Edge. If there's subassemblies, there's not. This is a very flat model in this case, but if there are subassemblies, those would be listed here, and then you could drill down into those by opening up additional information. From the model panel, you'll also be able to access a metadata panel, and if I go over to the parts metadata and then select a part, any part, you'll see that the metadata that's been assigned to that part is also imported. This is metadata that's assigned to the part in Solid Edge itself, so you can bring that in. Inside the software here, you can also go through and add your own metadata or modify it at this point if you'd like. It'll also bring in any configurations that you have. So if I go to Configurations ribbon and look under the configurations, there's really only one configuration on this model, so this isn't very handy at this point, but in general, this is where your configurations would be listed that would come in from Solid Edge. Some other data that would be imported too, there's exploded views can be brought in, model views, your PMI data. Again, this model doesn't have those things. We'll have a different model later that'll have some PMI, and then another demonstration that has exploded views built into it as well. Okay, so how you use the software, let's close out this panels here, is you can use the left mouse button to rotate, the right mouse button will zoom in and out, and the middle button will pan around. Of course, you can change the moding for the left mouse button by going to rotate, zoom, pan, etc. here. You can click on different parts to select them for various reasons, for highlighting, for bringing up the metadata panel, those kind of things. Another thing that you will see brought in is if I go to the Illustrate and bring up the storyboard, this is what you'll also see is that these are another way that the configurations are brought in. So we have just one configuration. This is very simple here in this case. There's always a default one, and then this one has the one configuration. So this is a default storyboard that you may or may not want to use for anything that you're going to create and publish. Now, to talk about the user interface overall, if you want to start going from left to right, the Illustrate ribbon is where you'll spend a lot of your time. This is where you're going to create illustrations, that is captured views of your 3D model, and then they're going to save off to different storyboards. So that's kind of the goal of life in this whole product, is to create illustrations and then go and publish them. So you'll see we start with illustrations. There's various tools in between, and then publish is our final destination, I guess. If I go to the 3D view, this is where you can change the view, the look and feel of the render style, for example. For most of what we're going to do today, we're going to go, well, first let's see, we can change the background color, change different render styles, and I think for what we're going to do today, was going to do a shaded with edges look for most of our documentation today. Another important piece of the 3D view ribbon is the ability to bring up this viewpoint tool. So you can go to under Down here you have front and all these different views, and at the bottom of this you have custom, which will bring up your viewpoint ribbon. So if I go home, it's going to an isometric view, and I can look at different rotations about that isometric view. So this is really handy for setting up your viewpoints before you capture an illustration, so that you get nice crisp lines going straight up and down. That's what all these axonometric views do, is they end up with a viewpoint that has the vertical lines are going to go straight up and down, which always lends to very good looking illustrations. So I think let's go ahead and continue through this ribbon just real quick, and then we're going to move on. Materials ribbon allows you to go through and select different materials. There's a library of different materials included with the software, so you can apply materials that you might not like what's done in engineering. You can go ahead and apply that for downstream usage. You can edit them. The model ribbon, this is where you bring up your model panel. You can work with parts lists, and you can create exploded views. Configurations, you can bring in your configurations, you can create new ones here, and then you can do things like merge models together, merge in your tools or jigs or parts, hardware that might not be modeled in your solid edge file. And then when you get to publish, this is where you can go in and pick what you want to publish, to what format you want to publish: raster, vector, PDF, HTML, and which storyboard. This is where you would pick a storyboard after you've created those storyboards, and then go publish those. So I think that's your first top-level overview of just the software and its interface. In the next video, we'll start working on creating our first set of illustrations. Okay, now we're ready to go through and create our first set of illustrations. We're going to create 4 illustrations to begin with. And let's start by creating a blank storyboard. That's where we store and organize our illustrations into. So let's do select, and we'll just do a new storyboard, and we'll change this to my storyboard. Okay. And you'll see if I bring up and show the storyboard panel again that there's nothing down here. No illustrations have been created, and that's going to be our job for the next step here. So for our first illustration, let's just go and let's hit home. We'll get into a nice viewpoint here, and we're going to create a title for this. So let's just kind of move this to the side a little, leave some room for a text here, and then we're just going to say new illustration, and we'll call it title. So when you do this, we can edit the markups now or later. Let's just go ahead and edit some, which will put us into editing markup mode. You'll notice we have an orange border around the view. This indicates that we're working on the illustration. So any changes we make, any movements I make here, are going to be captured into the final illustration. When I add text, this is going to be captured too. So let's add a title here. Let's just call this height and pivot. You'll notice that it turns red when the spelling's wrong. Spell checker is built in there. Okay, so we'll just say okay on that. Position that here nicely. And so we've now created our first illustration. And when I hit the checkbox here, that's going to save it off, or that's going to capture what's there. And then you'll see my thumbnail down here representing this illustration gets rendered. So how this works is if you're ever off of this, you can always go down here and click on the illustration to bring it back up. Or once we have a couple here, we'll be able to step through those or show those in different ways. Okay, so for our next illustration, we're going to want to create something from the opposite side. So I can hit escape, and that will deactivate, if you will, that illustration. And I'm going to bring up the viewpoint panel, which happens to be here. Oh, by the way, you can always bring up panels by right-clicking and choosing just from the menu here. That's another easy way to get to any panel that you might need instead of having to find it in the ribbon itself. So that's a shortcut for you. So we're going to pick a different viewpoint here. That looks like the home. We actually want the opposite side of that one for this illustration here. And then we're going to capture this second illustration. And for this example, we're just going to add some balloons and show how that you can do that. Balloons. And that's really simple. You use the call out tool, and you can click this, and then you just begin to drag off from that point. Well, I picked the same part twice, so I'm just going to delete that one. And this is how you can do it manually. In a moment, we'll talk about how you can do a little more automated version of pulling off of these balloons. So let's see. Grab a few more here. We'll call it a wrap. Okay, so that's we've now created 5 balloons, and if we wanted to change the format of those, for example, we actually want to make them balloons, we can select all of them, and then we can bring up the properties panel over here, and then we can turn on the balloon lines, and I'll pick circle at this point. So you can also go and pick different squares or whatever you would like for those. Another thing you can do, just while we're in here, if I select all these, you can bold them, italicize them, etc., change the font, the size, everything up here using this part of the interface as well. Okay, so that's our second illustration. Again, I click checkbox, and we end up with it captured down here, and now we have these 2 that we can flip through. Again, I'm going to hit escape. You don't really have to do that, but it's always kind of clean to hit escape before you make another one. And our next one is going to be highlighting in on this L bracket. So again, we're going to hit home. I'm going to highlight the L bracket, and we'll zoom in on this. You know, I actually would prefer a different highlighting color. So before we do that, I'm going to go over here and pick a highlight color of this brighter red, and then we're going to make our illustration. Okay, so let's do that. And this is just going to be our third illustration. We'll do new. We'll do a part that is selected is all we're really showing here. And in this case, we don't want to edit markups. We're not going to add any markups. We're just going to select that part and grab an illustration from there. So I'm going to turn off the edit markups part, and we'll just capture that illustration. And you can see that it goes straight down to the board here, and we're ready to go. I think you can also hit Control E to capture illustrations without even hitting the button. That's a shortcut key, Control E. And then for our final one, I'm going to do right click here. I'm going to isolate the selection and then hit home on just that selected part. And then we'll go and we'll take one more here. And this is going to be isolated. And in this case, we do want to add a markup, so I'm going to turn that back on. And then we're going to pull off, you're going to show a way you can use metadata here. So I'm going to just take a call out, and we'll pull that off here. And you'll notice that it has a number. First of all, I want to turn off that outline on it, so I'll do that. And then I'm going to right click, and we're going to pick change text. And we're going to change this to actually a part node, which is the metadata coming in. And instead of number, we're going to scroll up here and we're going to pick material. Okay, so that's going to indicate the material. And you can see that it just pulls that out of the metadata that came from came over from Solid Edge. That's one of the compatibility points on the software. Okay, so now let's see. Let's close this one out. Save it or whatever, click the checkbox, and you'll see that we've created our first 4 illustrations, and we can click through those here. We'll talk about these boxes in between in a minute. That's the transitions. And so I think the next step we want to do is we want to jump in and do some publishing. Okay, so now that we have our 4 illustrations, we're ready to publish these. So we can flip over to the Publish ribbon, and from the Publish ribbon, we can choose what we want to publish in the sense of what format we want to publish to. In this case, we have raster, vector, PDF, HTML5. We'll talk about some of these other ones later. For now, we're just going to do a simple raster publish. So we'll pick that, and then we can fill in the properties for what we want to create. So let's create a series of ping files. Let's change this resolution to, let's double it, 2000 by 1600, so that we have some nice pictures there, images there. And you'll see that I get a preview of what we're going to have here, which will show me how it's going to crop the different images and pretty much what they're going to look like once they're published. You can also notice that there's an output list here that lists what we're going to create. So we're going to create these 4 images because we have 4 illustrations, and each one is going to have the name that we've given them. So you'll notice down here in our storyboard we have title, balloons, selected, isolated. Basically you're going to get file names with a .ping at the end of those using those same names. Sometimes you'll have your storyboard up while you're publishing. You can always close it or bring it up. That's up to you. And you can use the output to flip through and see what you're going to get when you do the publish. The second step of publishing, and this one's already kind of set up for us because we were working on that storyboard, is to pick the storyboard that you want to publish. So in this case, we want to publish the one we just worked on. We could go and pick the default one that came straight out of, you know, what was created in Solid Edge. In this case, not much. So we'll just stick with the My Storyboard one here. And then we're going to hit Publish Now, and we will pick a folder. Let's see, where are we? Let's just go here, make a new folder called Images. Do you still don't know? I don't want to merge it. Yeah, let's just go with new folder. That's fine for now. Okay, so it'll publish out to that new folder, and you'll see we'll get a preview of those. We'll get the folder directory, and we can, you know, quickly go and step through these and see the nice high-resolution images that we created from our publishing there. Now, the same process in this case works for, you know, if you wanted to make vector graphics, you could just bring up the vector publisher. You know, you pick SVG or EPS or something, and then you would publish out to those in the same kind of manner to a folder that would have all your SVGs and any other supporting data. When we get to PDF publishing and HTML5 publishing, we'll do that in a second. It works a little differently. You'll pick a template to publish through. But we're going to go and create something a little more interesting for that first, a step-by-step process that has a lot more value for an interactive publication. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so now that we've completed our first publishing, let's talk about something a little more advanced. Let's go to the configurations ribbon here, and we'll talk about configurations in a little bit more detail. Let me close these out. Okay, configurations basically allow you to create a subset of parts or a different configuration of your 3D CAD file. It's very similar to Solid Edge in the way that, you know, it's different organizations of your model. In this example, let's go ahead and hit escape and get rid of the illustration there. We're going to create a configuration to work from with just this bracket here and the controller component there. To do that, we're going to use one technique. We're going to actually select parts here. We're going to drag out. That'll get as many as we can, and then I'm going to hit Control click to select that one and add that to our selection set. And now we can make our configuration by simply going down here and doing New Configuration from Selected Parts. And let's change this name to Controller. Okay, so we've now created our first configuration. Let's go back to, I like the advanced mouse mode. Let's go back to that, and we have just this. So you'll notice if I hit Show All, it doesn't bring back any of the parts. It's working as if this is everything. This is that's how the configurations work. Make it easy. If we go back to, you know, our default one from Solid Edge, we get all our parts back. And if we do a Show All, then that, you know, brings all these parts back at this point. Okay, so let's go back to our controller. Another way people will make configurations is through the model panel. Now, this does not have any sub-assemblies, but a lot of times they'll take a sub-assembly and you can right-click a sub-assembly and say Create Configuration from sub-assembly. That's real handy for when they're doing technical documentation. Because the configuration itself, not only will it only show those parts, but if you go over to your parts list, it has a smaller version of the parts list that only reflects what is on your scene. And that comes out really handy later when you're working with pages and you drag out a parts list on a document page. It'll only put the parts for that configuration, only display those. Makes it easy. You don't have to go and manually create a lot of different smaller parts lists. So I think that's what we wanted to cover with configurations for now. Next step we're going to do is create an exploded view from this subset of parts. Okay, we're going to make our first exploded view now, just using this set of parts. Remember that you can get to exploded views. You can export those from Solid Edge, so you could reuse what you may have already created in Solid Edge. Many people, though, do use our exploded tools to create their exploded views. Takes that work off of the engineer, lets a downstream user pick up from there. In this case, we're going to create an exploded view, and to do so, we can go to the Model ribbon. Under Exploded Views, we hit New Exploded View, and we'll just take the default name. And I'm also, if you'll notice, it automatically kicks us into this move parts, and we have a checkbox over here showing that we're in this mode here. I'm also going to right click here and bring up the exploded views panel so that you can see kind of what's happening as we go along here. Right now you see we have a tree and there's no steps made. Now when I click this, one of our parts, we're getting a step immediately created here. And if now I'm going to hold down Control, and we're going to add 2 parts to that same step. So you'll see it did not create a second step, we just have one. Now what we want to do is create a step here, but we want to use a smart axis. And so by selecting the smart axis, you'll see that this automatically looked at this part and was smart enough to figure out the shape of the part and decide what's a good axis for that. Sometimes that works really well, especially for things like screws and nuts and bolts that have kind of a symmetrical shape. When you get into some odd shapes, then the smart axis doesn't seem to work so well, and I'll show that how to adjust for that in just a second. Okay, so the first one here, we pull these screws off here, and then I'm going to use the Shift key, because the next step is on the back. So we're going to use Shift when you're in this mode. Will allow you to go into your advanced mouse mode, and I can use my left mouse button then to rotate around to where we can get to the next steps, the next parts we're going to need to select. Okay, so now I'm not going to Control click. I'm just going to click on this nut, and you'll see it made our step 2 immediately for us here. And then I'm going to Control click again on here. We still just have a step 2 with these 2 parts built into it. And then I'll pull those out. Give a little room here, and then we're down to these washers here. So I'm going to grab this washer, and then I'm going to Control click again. But if you accidentally Control click on something, I was trying to click on this washer but I missed and I clicked on this, you can just toggle it back off by holding Control click down again to get rid of that part, and then we'll just click that one and safely pull those off. Okay, so that's what we've been able to do using just the smart axis. These are very symmetrical shapes, so it works really well again. So see what happens when I click. Our next move is this part. So I click this, and it was incorrect in its adjustment for that. A lot of times, if that's the case, you can change over to an object axis. And if I shift around, you'll see that this isn't going to work very good for this one either. This whole part is off. It's off the XYZ, so the model axis is not working very well for us. So in this case, we're going to want to go and adjust, and we're going to pick a face axis, and then we're going to change the axis so that we can make sure and pick, see, this is a nice smooth face. It'll give us a perpendicular angle there, and then we can just pull that piece off. And so now that we're in face axis mode, my next one I can just grab here, and we'll pull that off as well. And it looks like we have missed a few parts here. I see those. I see that we had missed doing these washers. That's okay. Let's leave a little room for them in between here. It looks like they should be on top of that. Yeah, they should be on top of that right there. So we'll leave a space here for them. And I think other than getting those washers done, we're in good shape. So now let's just click on these, and then again here. I'm going to pull the washers out into a better place here. Now, if you're doing an ordered one, this one doesn't really matter. We're just doing a exploded view. But when you start to do step-by-step kind of activities, you'll want these to be in the right order. And so let's take a look at that idea real quick. I'm going to try to get these washers into the right order so that they pop out before this guy. And what I mean by the right order is you'll see that our last step here is the washers. And instead we actually want the washers to go here before that part. So you can just reorder this. We can right click, move that step 6 up. So now we're going to have this, the washers, and then that final step right there. So that's just a detail about how to work with the software, how the tree works with everything, how the steps work and all that too. And you can always go back. Let's say you wanted to adjust, maybe we wanted to, oops, I hit shift, clicked on that part and it hit it, so I'm just going to do a show all. So maybe we want to adjust it a little bit. Maybe these are a little too far off, maybe these washers. So we can just go find those when they make their movement, like right here, and then we can right click, edit the step details, and that puts us right into there where we can adjust that here. Let's just make them equal center kind of there. You'll notice you can also not going to cover it in the video, but you can also type in different values. That's another way that you can adjust them if you're not liking what you're getting using the handles. Okay, so I think once I click select there, and then again, let's go all the way to the end of our exploded view so we see what all the work we did here. I think we've pretty much got our exploded view in good shape, and then we're ready to move on to our next section. We're going to auto balloon this one. Okay, so we're now going to create our 5th illustration and add that to the same storyboard that we were working with before. So let's go back to our illustrate ribbon, and let's just bring up our illustration panel here. This is the 4 storyboards. I'm sorry, the storyboard panel. These are the 4 illustrations that we were working with before. So our next step is to get a nice, we got the exploded view. We're going to capture that with balloons, and let's just see how home looks. Yeah, I think that'll work as a reasonable viewpoint for us here. Okay, so we got home, and now we're going to add some balloons to that. So to do so, we'll make our illustration new. This one we'll call auto ballooned. And we are going to edit markups, so we'll say okay. And to automatically add our balloons, and this feature works really well when you have a smaller set of parts that you're working with. If you have 50 to 100 parts, it typically is not going to work very well unless you select the parts and use a different way of doing it. But 50 auto callouts doesn't always come out with the best results. But with a small set like this is bound to do pretty good. So you can do an auto create from visible, or like I was trying to allude to, you could do an auto create from selected. If you have a large number of parts, you could just select 10 of them or something and do that. Okay, so let's do an auto create from visible, and this will automatically create some balloons for us here that we can now adjust into place. You might want to grab a few of these. Actually, let's do something here. Let's take these, let's enable the balloons on them. You see they get crossed over. We can then, I believe, use auto arrange again, and let's just do a vertical lower left, and it gives us much better spacing in that case, so we can adjust them from there. And you can see everything plays out a little better in this example. Okay, so now let's just take these 3, move them up into this area, and then we'll adjust these 4, make them a little better over here. And if we wanted to, for example, maybe we want this number 1 to not point to the center. Maybe we want it to point to the edge. Maybe we think that'll look a little better. We can select it, then we can right click and we can reposition the leader. And as long as we click on the part again, the number will stay the same, and we'll just get a different leader on that. I actually probably move this one myself, try to not get crossovers and everything, and then maybe reposition that one to get a better look. Okay, so that's how you can, and once we're done, again, we just click the checkbox here. So that's how you can automatically generate an illustration that has, balloon numbers automatically created for us there. Okay, now we're going to talk about the process for setting up for example, an interactive 3D assembly instruction. And to do so, basically what we'll need to do is create a suitable exploded view. And then we're going to use our storyboard wizard to create the illustrations for that automatically. And you'll see how handy that is, how fast that is to create and take a exploded view and turn it into illustrations. And then we're going to publish that to a 3D PDF. And the trick there is to pick a template that has some buttons or whatever built into it, or a clickable table built into it, so that you have the interactivity that's apparent as soon as somebody opens that up as a 3D PDF. So we're kind of starting a little bit anew here. So we'll still have this storyboard in our project, but we're going to create a new one in a little bit. Right now what we want to do is go back and go to our original configuration. And let's close out the storyboard. And we're going to add a new exploded view here, but we're going to work this one a little differently. The first exploded view that we created was more about you wanted all the parts to be equidistant apart so that we could have a nice exploded view. It's not made for animation necessarily. For an animated one, a lot of times you may want all the parts to show up and then they don't need to start from a full, spaced out positioning. So let's go ahead and create a second, we'll go model, exploded view, new exploded view. And in this case, we're just going to, our goal is going to be assembling this bracket. So that's where we're going to end up. That's going to be the first step of our process. And if we're making assembly instructions, a lot of time what we're going to do is just disassemble it. So it's going to be in reverse order basically from what it will be at the end. So let's just start doing this here. I don't think, let's see, let's make sure we're on object. Smart would probably work here too. So we're going to pull for access to use here. So we're just going to pull off some of these parts. These are our step-by-step process that we're getting here. And we don't care if these overlap, because they're going to, when we use our storyboard wizard in a moment, they're going to come in and they're going to hide and show automatically for us. Okay, so now on this one, we want to move that one out too. Let's just move it up, and let's move that up, and then we're going to shift around and we'll just add all these other parts. We'll control click them into this sequence or into that step. Get a little more to click on here. You could also go use the tree if you know, you can control click on objects in your parts tree if you know what that is. Okay, and then let's continue on through here. And you see we're kind of making a jumbled mess here. No big deal. Don't worry about the overlap. Okay, so now we have that exploded view built, and we'll check that off. And I think the next step we'll have is to incorporate this using the storyboard wizard. Okay, storyboard wizard. We'll go over to our illustrate ribbon, and earlier we used select and we created a new storyboard which resulted in a blank storyboard for us. In a moment we're going to use this function, which is the storyboard wizard, which will automatically generate some illustrations for us to start from. Before we do that, and generally before you would do that in practice, you would want to get a good viewpoint here, and you might want to adjust things like, you know, again, let's go and adjust our 3D view to have a highlight of red. The green came back because one of our first two illustrations had a green highlighting, and we started from it when we created others, not paying attention to the highlight as much. Okay, so now we have a red, and that's what we want in our animation. And let's see how the home view works here and see if that's a good place for us. I think that'll work. And then we do a show all. Okay. Okay, so to use our storyboard wizard, we go illustrate, select storyboard wizard, and we're going to pick a few things here. Create a storyboard from an exploded view. It's picking the exploded view 2 that we just created a moment ago. We're going to, since we're doing an assembly process, we're going to reverse the steps, because remember we did a disassembly by pulling things apart. We're going to reverse the steps, and that'll create an assembly for us, assembly process. And we're going to select the parts for visually. We want to see them as they're being assembled, and we're going to hide all the parts until it's time for them to be assembled, and then we'll just include a view of the fully assembled state. And once I hit finish, you'll notice that it's going to render these out, create these, and then bring up our storyboard panel that will have the thumbnails here, that we can see that it automatically generated this process for us here. So, you know, in the first step, we animate, and it brings that piece in, and you know, down through it, and you'll see how the wizard is automatically hidden, or is automatically showing the different parts for us. It's also automatically set up the reverse for us, so we don't have to go do that on our own. And it was really easy for us to get this animatable step-by-step process set up. Now, some of the details you can notice is that in between here, these are transitions, and I was clicking those in order to preview what they would do. A lot of times people will change these transitions out, either the timing or the transition itself. If you notice when I click this one, both the part and the viewpoint move at the same time. If it's a small movement like, you know, this one here we're about to look at, it's probably not something you might want to change, but for this one, it might look better if actually we used a different transition. And so in this case, let's try accelerate 2 and see what that looks like. So in this case, it moves into the viewpoint and then animates the part. And I think that looks a little better, especially when you get over to some of these, you know, that have a bigger movement. So if we take this and change this to accelerate to, then we'll move out. Actually, accelerate to reverse will probably work better for it. So what it'll do here is it'll move the part, then the view. And that's what the reverse means. So reverse does the part, then the view, and if it doesn't have reverse, then it moves the view, then the part. And these others are probably okay for our example here. They don't move too far. Another thing that you can do, especially if you're breaking them up, you might want to change the duration to 3 seconds or something instead of just 2. And you'll see that it gives a little more time for that animation, which helps a lot of the time. Another thing in completing out this storyboard that's going to be used for our interactive 3D PDF is that you'll notice that the naming here, it took the names coming from the steps, but since they were reversed, we have step 8, and then we have step 7, on down through that process there. Let's use a tool here that'll quickly change all these for us. And of course, we could go in here and type in if we wanted to be more specific, like install L bracket, etc. But let's just use an automation tool for this. So I'm going to go to under the select again, illustrate. Under the storyboard side of the select, there's an advanced menu here, and we can change the illustration names in the core storyboard. And we're just going to call this step, and you'll see down here it gives a preview right here, shows a preview step with no space. So I'm just going to put space in here, step space, and then this is start numbering at 1. You can pick different formats, A, B, C, first, second, etc. If we wanted to add a suffix or whatever, we could. So it's just an automatic tool for renaming our illustrations. And when I hit OK, you'll notice it goes through and all of the illustrations have now been updated to show a naming that makes a lot more sense. You start at step 1 instead of step 8 now. So I think that covers the creation of that storyboard using the storyboard wizard and some of the tools that can help with that. And we'll move on now to making our first interactive 3D PDF. Okay, now we're going to create a 3D PDF that will incorporate this, include this step-by-step process here. So let's go, I'm just going to close out this for now. Clean up some real estate here. And let's go to publish. Put that back. And then we're going to go to our 3D or our PDF publisher in this case. Now in the Solid Edge Illustrate product, you're able to create a single page by using one of the templates here. So it'll create a single page PDF file from your content here. So what you get is once we pick the PDF, we're able to pick from a number of different templates here. So if you pull down here, portrait or landscape works really good for PDF. So maybe something like this. Let's see what that one looks like. This one's pretty nice. It has, you know, a very simple interface. You got step-by-steps over here. We're clicking through our animation. You can see, you can preview how it's going to act inside the PDF. Go back to the first one there. We can do things like change out the title. So we can, what was this? A height and pivot, assembly, instructions. Let's just say assembly. Looks like we got a little too long for that one. You'll notice down here, step 1 is showing up as you click through the things here. We can also put our own logo on this. So let's go and pull up this Master Mover logo here. And if you want to, you can change out, you know, the different styles. We can go to you know, different styles for the text. And then you can change out the theme. This one's pretty minor on the theme. I guess it'll end up just changing some of that light blue to, you know, different colors, but I think we'll just stick with what we got here. Okay, so and then, you know, we're ready to publish, and we just hit, we've selected the storyboard we want. Go ahead and do it again, and we hit publish now. And looks like that's what we want. You can look and see if the defaults you are here for what you want. Hide the toolbar, for example. Maybe you want that, maybe not. But anyway, then you just hit create PDF, and this will go and create the PDF. Now in some cases, in like for example on Microsoft Windows, it'll use Edge to bring up the PDF, and that does not support 3D. You need to have Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Reader installed and open it with that. Otherwise the 3D likely will not show up. It needs to have the Adobe Reader. my case, I have Acrobat installed on this computer, and now that we have Adobe open here, we can look and see the behavior. So first of all, I can click this. You'll often get this 3D content's been disabled. This can be turned off as a setting for Acrobat. I leave mine on for demo purposes. So we'll trust this document. And so now I can click the 3D view here, and you'll see how this behaves. We can still rotate it and pan, zoom it, etc. And we can step through, you know, this process that we've put together one by one. You'll notice that it acts just the same way it acted in our preview. We have step 4 showing up down here as we click through it. We have the styles and everything that we put together. Another thing that the PDF has the ability is it creates the bookmarks. We chose to, and so you can click on the different bookmarks to bring specific illustrations right back up. So that's another feature of the Adobe PDF side of things. Okay, another output format for creating interactive 3D documentation would be HTML5. You can, just like making a PDF, we can switch over to the HTML5 publisher, and in this case we're going to save off a single HTML file. There's advantages to single or to the folder based one. Specifically, if you have larger models, it puts up a nice progress bar, and it generally supports larger models better because everything doesn't have to be crammed into a single file. The single file has its own advantages. One is that you can view it without actually putting it onto a web server. You can just double click the HTML, and generally that's okay with the browser. Then it's also something that can easily be shared, like through email or put on Dropbox or Box or something like that. So it's easier to manage versus more robust, I guess, is your choice here. Okay, so we're going to do a single file one because that's very easy for demo purposes, and then we're going to pick a HD template because those work better for the HTML in my experience, in my mind. So let's, maybe this one I think is one that looks pretty good in this. Okay. Let's see, so we want to pick our storyboard. It looks like it went back to the default one. Let's pick this one. And so now we have our nice 1 through 9 again that we set up with our storyboard. This one has these buttons for clicking through the different steps, and it doesn't display this name dynamically, it just puts it into this table here. If we had a description, it would set that here too. So, and we could go in here and type into this custom text into here if we'd like, as far as a feature that you can do with the templates. Okay, well, I'm going to ignore that for now, and I'm just going to go to Publish Now, and this is fine, Phase 10. We'll save that off. So that'll create our HTML document that can be shared with anybody. This is based on powered by Share 3D technology, which means that it works very well with any browser, any modern computer, PCs, Androids, Macs, iOS applications, anything with a browser that supports HTML5 and WebGL. There's no plugins needed, so it's pretty good stuff. So we now have it here. We can rotate, pan, and zoom it, and then we can use the functionality built into the template as well. So in this case, we can step through our different step-by-step process right here in HTML, and this is just brought up in the web browser, the Edge browser. Okay, a very powerful capability of using documentation software that's tied to your CAD model is the ability to do updates. That is, to when a 3D CAD design changes, for example, it's changed in SolidWorks, being able to make it easy for a customer, a user, to bring that new model in and keep all the work that they've done on the documentation side is very important. So let's just get ourselves back to kind of a regular old state here, and we'll talk about doing an update here. So in the example that we have for this model, when we do the update, there's two things that are going to occur. One is this flange here is a replacement part, so, well, this bracket. And in the new part, you'll see that it has a much more of a flange effect. It's not flat here, and you'll see visually there's a flange. And the other thing to notice is that we'll also, instead of we're going to have a modified part in this example. So the L bracket here, it's going to be modified. And the way you handle those when you do an update is different. Of course, the modified part is much easier to work with because in general, the software already knows what that part is, knows where to put that into any exploded views that might be around it. It knows how to work with that. When you have a replacement part, it doesn't necessarily know those things. It's a new part to the software, so you have to deal with that. You have to do some manual steps to get everything up to date after you do the update. So let's start by, I want to do two things. I want to bring up, show the storyboard, and I'm going to actually go to my storyboard, which had our different, this will be a little simpler on the update process here. So let's do that, and then we're going to go and under model, there's a button, I'm sorry, under configurations, there's an update button. And then we're going to go here. I've already exported this Rev2 from Solid Edge. It was the same process as before. We opened up the changed revision and we saved off the 122 part that had been revised. So that's the file that we're going to have. Let me move this out of the way so that you can see the changes. Watch for the bracket, L bracket here to change, and watch for the part here to change. So when we do update models, you'll see now that we have those changes that were mentioned. The storyboard now is re-rendered to show all those changes. So a lot of these, you know, there's nothing to be done. So if I look at this one, that one's fine. Everything's in the right place. I look at this one. Complexities come in with hide and show and with exploded views. So like when we get to this isolated illustration here, we have a part that we don't want. It's very easy for us to edit that. We can just edit the illustration. You see we're now in this orange mode that shows that we're editing it, and I'm just going to hold down shift and click it and it'll hide that part. So that one's really easy. If we wanted to look at this exploded view too, don't need to save, you'll notice that it hasn't been moved properly. It hasn't moved into position. Well, actually, that one did not change. Okay, yeah, we didn't move that part in that exploded view at all, so he's okay as well. So that one's okay. Now let's go look at our other storyboard. And it's a little, you know, think through here. It's pretty easy to do this once you know what you're doing, but you'll notice that there's two things going on here. First of all, when we look at this part, shouldn't be here for a long time. It should be hidden all the way up into really, you know, after this frame. It should not still be there, but right here is where it should show. So there's two things going on. One, and this also shows that it's not in the right position. It's not adhering to the exploded view that other part was. So remember, this is a replacement part, so we have to tell the software what to do with this guy. So the first and the easiest thing to do is we can look at, there's a special mode in the model panel, and if you go and pull down here, you'll see new parts from last update. And it shows us that. So if we select that, that's the new part, and it's telling us right there that this one's something that we might need to consider in our changes here. So what I'm going to do for the first step is we're going to go ahead and hide this guy in every view before this. So we have an automatic tool that lets us do that. And let's see, I believe that if we right click this and under advanced, there's a hide selected, which we have in the current storyboard before this illustration. So if I choose that, then you'll see that it kept it in this one, but in every one before that we cleared it out. We cleaned up that part of the thing. So now the last step that we need to do is to get it to honor the exploded view and to add it to that exploded state. This is pretty easy to do too. We're just going to go to our exploded views, and it indicates to us which one might have the problem. So if I click through here, you'll see that red one is showing us that that's the step that's missing a part now. So really what we need to do is we just need to edit this exploded view, and then I can control click to add that part into that. We could have done that from the model tree or the parts, the update panel that I showed you a second ago where it listed that part. You could control click it there too. So I think we now click that. And everything's back in shape now. So we have this step without the part, and then that transitions right into this part in the proper place. Looks like we have it selected. We could add, yeah, let's do that too. Edit this illustration to be back to where we were. We want that to be selected as well. And so now it's basically everything's back in shape, and we've proceeded to do our update with the new model now. Okay, another thing that you might want to do with your solid edge data is to export the PMI information from that for documentation purposes, for doing model-based design, those kind of activities. To do so, what you'll need to do is create model views of that PMI data. That's how the scaling occurs. So in this example, we're back in solid edge here, and if you look, there's a PMI section here, and under model views there's a couple different views. So if I apply that view, looks like that's that one, then we're going to see what we're going to end up getting when we go back out, when we export this QSM. So there's a couple model views there. I think that's enough to kind of tell the story. And then what our next step is pretty simple: add-ins, save as a QSM. There's already called with PMI, so let's just save that off. And then we'll go open it up in the Solid Edge illustration product. Okay, to open up we just need to import again, and we'll pick the one with the PMI data here that we just exported there. Okay, so what you'll see here is once we've brought in this information, you'll see the two model views. These are the model views that were created in a Solid Edge, and those are coming over into the software here. And then you can also reuse a lot of this. So let's look at just the assembly tree here. We have this model, and our PMI data is listed under a special PMI block here. And if I click the different ones, you'll see that this one gets selected. So each model view has its own section of PMI data, and they're scaled differently based on the viewpoints that were created in Solid Edge. Now, you can always go through here, and let's say I wanted to create my own view once I'm in the documentation software in illustration. I can go through, and let's say we only wanted 40 to be showing up. We can go through and find that, hide everything until we run across it. So we'll leave that one on and take those others off, and then we'll just zoom in and maybe get a view here showing that. In fact, may want to just do a top view and center that. Okay, so then we can just do like create our new illustration here, top view. And so we can leverage the PMI data once it's brought into the documentation side without having to create all the model views over there. But you do have to create model views to define the scale that's going to be used on the documentation side. Okay, so we now have these three. I'm going to show you a quick tool. I'm not a big fan of just the light blue without the edges, so I'm going to show you a quick way to change that. Let's do a shaded with edges view. Let's go background white. And then you notice these aren't applied to the illustrations here, but it's easier for us to do so. We can go to Illustrate, select, Advanced, apply the render style to the current storyboard. And that'll take that white look and apply it to all of them. So now these are saved off permanently in this manner. And so that is how you can use the PMI data. And at this point, I guess the next step would be to go and create a PDF or an HTML file from this that would make it easy to share that PMI data so that you could do model-based design or share those dimensions with somebody that doesn't have Solid Edge or something. Now for the final step of getting our PMI data to people, we can go to the publish. We're just going to pick a PDF at this point. And then again, just like anything else, we pick a template. I'm going to go to, I think the regular old portrait or landscape templates look better in PDF than the high resolution ones. So let's see what this one is. I'm kind of a fan of the simple ones too. That one actually goes through, I kind of want a list of the, I want to find a table that lists the actual Actually, that'd be in the bookmarks too, so that'd probably be okay. This one looks like it lists it. You can see the little table there. Okay. Yeah, so we have our different elements listed here, different scaling based on the solid edge export. And so let's just go back and do that. We can also add our logo if we wanted. I'm not going to worry about it. Or you can change out your title, subtitle, same things we went over earlier when we were doing template publishing. But we could now do publish now and create that. Another way that has the list here on the page, another way when you're in PDF is to use the bookmarks. So you really could go and do a full screen if you didn't want all the, the layout and everything. If you just wanted a full page view of the 3D, you could do a full screen one and then use the bookmarks that are native to PDF to pull this data back up. So again, we click to activate. It's going to complain unless you go and turn this off. So trust this document always. Okay, so there we go. We have our PMI data in PDF. We can zoom in and pan around. We can bring back the different viewpoints that have potentially different scaling for different operations. We can go to the top view that we just created. And as I was mentioning, over here we have the PDF, the bookmarks, and these are all another way of transitioning to these different views.